All right.
So, Governor, we just going through a number of bills that passed the legislature doing bill prep have discovered a number of bills that have been removed from enrolling and engrossing. And we're hearing from lawmakers that several your staff and perhaps you yourself had asked them to withdraw them from consideration this year.
Oh, during the process?
After they had already passed the full legislature.
Okay.
In exchange for a commitment from you to keep working on the policy next year.
Yeah.
How much is that happening?
I don't know that. I think it's probably pretty modest. I think we've had a proactive engagement with the legislature. There's different styles. Everybody does things a little differently. We've leaned in to a lot of issues. We tried to shape the conversation. I've tried to be a little more honest and transparent with legislative leaders, saying, look, the way this bill's drafted right now, it may pass, but I can't support it. And here are the reasons why. If you want to amend it, it would be wonderful if you would amend it, because then I'm more likely to sign it. Some embrace that. In fact, vast majority make the amendments so that we can spend the time like we did today signing the bills. Some sort of test that theory. And those are often reflected in vetoes or delays based upon commitments we make to address these issues in the budget. I think the vast majority of those circumstances, which are a very small number, are usually budgetary related. Things that we can do administratively and or in the budget. Things we can do with a stroke of a pen, with more flexibility, less prescription, or can do in the traditional budget, which to me is sacrosanct. And I think you have to be a little stubborn on the budget, especially when you're entering into a recessionary environment, and you will see it's not a small number. And there's an enormous amount of money that is being obliged outside the budget process that I cannot unfortunately support.
But there's a number of concerns that we've heard that the concerns raised by the administration was late. It's after already deals had been cut and an amendment
I don't
couldn't
know.
be
You
taken
got to
anymore.
give me the specific examples of that. But
Well, there's a hearing aid bill by Assemblyman Bloom, 598.
Oh, the cost of that. Yeah. So that's a classic. I love that bill, and we're going to solve it in next year's budget. So yeah, I mean it's hey, how many thousand bills were introduced? I mean, my gosh. But this is, we got a lot of big things done this year that were vexing and challenging because of this kind of interplay and engagement. And I think it's a better approach than a passive approach. And then that one is a mysterious one. And then people sit there and say, well, geez, if you told me about changing or to and, I would have done it. Why don't you engage us? In some cases, we miss those. And I confess that's often the case. I mean, that you sit there and someone, none of us really flagged it. The legislator didn't flag it. My team, there's only 4 or 5 of them on the legislative side. They didn't flag it, didn't seem controversial. And then we get to it and finance looks at it and says, wow, we missed this line. So that's called governing.
Governor, on Tuesday at the rent control rent cap bill signing, you had this shout out to Scott Wiener and the work he's doing on housing production, and then
Want
the
me to
next
lean in?
day you kind of mentioned density being on your
Priority.
agenda next year. Was that an implicit endorsement of
No,
SB 50
no,
and a
but it's,
desire to get some
as you know,
version of it done?
I've been very consistent in applauding Senator Wiener for his courage and leadership on getting the debate going around density and focusing on density in and around transit corridors. It's a core value of mine. I imagine it's shared by the vast majority of progressives in this building and across the state of California. If we're ever going to achieve our goals, our housing production goals, that's how you achieve them. The question is, how do we get a bill that can pass this legislature? And Scott, as you know, for 2 years has struggled to do that. It's not because of lack of intentionality. It's not because of lack of goodwill. He's made dozens of amendments. And so we're just trying to process that, and we're working with him. We're working with other legislative leaders. Senator Skinner had SB 330, which started with much stronger provisions, was watered down a little bit. We're trying to look at some of the things that were amended out and potentially see if we can help with that. So there's all kinds of things we want to do to help advance the cause. And we did sign, as you know, a lot of housing production legislation, not just protection legislation this year. And good enough never is. We got a lot more work to do, and I want to continue to lean into the density focus.
But on this idea of density, I mean, is SB 50 a framework that you're willing to work from in terms of trying to find a solution?
The reality is you can't do it alone. And we've got to create the conditions where he can get his colleagues to support it. It is a math problem right now. And so we are trying to help him with that process, and we're trying to organize ourselves around that. But with respect, SB 50 has become a proxy for everything, when in fact it's just one of many, many things that we're looking at. And I can assure you, issues of redevelopment remain open. We did the enhanced infrastructure financing districts, which didn't get much attention because 99.9% of people don't know what the hell you're talking about when you say EIFDs. But it is an increment strategy. We eliminated the voter threshold for bonded indebtedness. That 55% now is eliminated. So that was a significant thing, but it's not an ERAF shift, meaning we're not taking state money to offset those dollars. And so I know people still want that state contribution at the local level. So we're pursuing potential strategies for that as well, just giving you a sense of the contours of where we're hoping to lean in on the housing debate in the January budget.
After you spoke last night, PG&E CEO
Oh, yeah.
essentially owning the power shutoffs and saying that the company was unprepared. Your reaction, did you see
I didn't
of
see
what
his
he
press
said?
conference.
Okay, yeah, I mean, he just basically admitted that the company was not prepared, and this is after your comments at Callaway, so I wasn't sure if you had
Well,
a
I
reaction
mean,
to that.
I respect that acknowledgement because there's some evidence of that, some truth to that. And I think that's important. And, I think that's an encouraging statement if indeed that was made. And look, we're going to go through a very formal process of the PUC of assessing all the nuances and details in real time. It's already happening. You'll hear more about that in the coming days. And obviously, we're going to continue to press and push on all of the requirements that we laid out in that landmark utility bill that we passed a number of months ago. Right now, though, our number one job is getting everybody back online. And while we've seen a lot of progress last 24 hours, still not good enough. And there are people watching at a family member's home right now, this interview, and they're livid. And they want results immediately, and they deserve it, and they never want to see this happen again. At the same time, we're also battling some very large wildfires in Southern California because those winds have shifted now in the southern part of the state, or at least the kinds of wind patterns that occurred in the northern part of the state are now occurring in the southern part. So we are not out of the woods, literally or figuratively, in terms of our fire suppression and prevention and strategies.
A few months ago, you threatened, or not threatened, but you mentioned the M word of
Yeah. Municipalization. Yeah, no, and it's in our report. I mean, we laid that out in our report early on. It's a very familiar issue as a former San Francisco resident and mayor. And I acknowledged yesterday that the bankruptcy judge tipped his hat to those conversations. We had formally done so a number of months ago in a letter, correspondence between the mayor and the city attorney and myself in terms of their pursuits and supporting their pursuits. I want to keep an open mind about those parties that are engaged in this moment, meaning bondholders, equity holders. I don't want this thing rigged. There's some very tough players in this space that are vying to take over PG&E that may put us backwards, not necessarily push us forward. And so I think the more competition, the better. And I think it is an open-ended question, the size, scale, and scope of this utility and this entity. Is this corpus the right size to govern in a 21st century with new realities, new challenges? And that, to me, is the most important question we need to answer, and it's the question that will be decided through this bankruptcy process that, for me, is the most profound, and we're going to continue to push these parties to consider that question above all else.
But how many more strikes does PG&E get?
Oh, they don't get. I mean, they're in bankruptcy. They're done. I mean, they're one major wildfire away from complete insolvency. And but again, this is a private corporation, and to the extent that it is influential, it's arguably one of the most influential utilities in the United States because of its service territory. And when you're operating in 47, 48 counties, it's a massive, massive challenge. And so that's why it was so important to get the legislation done so we get them out of bankruptcy. We can recapitalize, deal with the prioritization of getting these settlements done, and then continue the fire safety requirements that were specified in our legislation and make sure we hold them to account. But at the same time, do it in a way where we don't just turn this thing over to the sharks, that are all about ROI and not about you and I as it relates to the best interest of the state.
Governor, after the shutoffs, a gentleman out of El Dorado, or Public Pines, who relied on an auction machine, he passed away after the shutoffs. The El Dorado Sheriff, they're investigating, but his family believes it is because of the
It's
shutoffs.
devastating beyond words. And I mean, losing a family member is horrific. And to the extent this was the reason why, I hope that is investigated, and I hope those responsible are held to account. I mean, that's devastating. We did everything in our power to try to help supplement our efforts around that, and I appreciate the fact that there is an investigation. We'll learn more about the details.
Governor, the medication abortion advocates are looking at your past rhetoric on reproductive rights, reading into how you may act on SB 24. Are they reading too much into
I
your
don't
past
know.
comments?
What are they concluding?
They think you're going to sign it,
Okay. Well, then they may be
but
right.
it's getting late.
I don't know. I guess 200. It is late. I mean, I'm running. What do we got?
267.
Oh, that's at 266.
A little
so
while
for
ago,
the
you said
record.
those are the more controversial bills that you're.
Yeah, I
have
said,
some
but I also
heartburn
said
over.
there's some easy ones. So I made that point. This may be one of the easy ones. So
Governor-
no, we'll be coming out very soon, but we'll see.
Governor, when you talk about sharks and ROI, are you talking about Elliott Management?
I'm talking about. I don't want to be specific, but you've seen consistency from me over the course of the last number of months of making the case we want more competitive bidding for these assets in the reorganization and restructuring. You could read between the lines.
Well, but if you say competitive, that's what the Elliott Management people are saying, is to make it.
I have a different,
competitive.
I think having more than just one outsized influential source of capital is advantageous. Each one will make that claim, but we need many bidders, and I can assure you this, personally, we have tried to engage others to participate in this process
Third, fourth parties.
in effort to continue a more competitive playing field. And that has also been extended by letters that we've written to the bankruptcy court. If you look at the actual language in those letters, we've also made our intention clear. There wasn't an aside comment. It's not just rhetorical. We are laying out our expectations. So continues to be fluid, and there's decisions to be made, including a couple days ago, that influence that process, but we want to continue to pursue it, and that includes the municipalization question.
Governor, how are these blackouts going to impact the work that you and lawmakers do next year? Like, what's the political fallout from these blackouts? And how is-
We're all leaning into it. I can't tell you how many conversations with legislative leaders, been with them all around the state in the last 72 hours. So we're all leaning into this space, and we're all trying to assess the facts and the protocols, what went right, what went wrong, how can we avoid this circumstance in the future at this kind of scale. And we're all doing that, I think, with a collaborative spirit, the same kind of spirit that brought us together around that utility effort. And so I can assure you, you will see additional efforts into the new year. A lot of it can be done administratively, and a lot is already being pursued by the Public Utilities Commission with its new leadership.
Are you worried that any of these blackouts were prompted at all by an effort on PG&E's part to put political pressure on you or lawmakers?
No, my gosh, I don't think that would be another level of outrage, if that were the why. Look, there are some objective truths. You now have 3 investor-owned utilities that have all pursued PSPS. None of the 3 did it at the scale of the largest IOU, which is PG&E. But the fact that they all did is suggestive of the unique characteristics of the moment. Low humidity, very consistently high winds, and then wind gusts that were not dissimilar to the conditions that created the worst fire season on record a year or so ago. I am not justifying the scale of this by any stretch of the imagination, but I am suggesting that is a proof point to the unique characteristics of this moment that led to this in other parts of the state.
All right, thanks everybody.
You're someone who likes to iterate, kind of look at what works and what doesn't, and make changes. So what would be some of your lessons learned from your first year making
Oh
laws
gosh,
for California?
give me some time to get out of the muck of the moment, and I could be more reflective. Right now, I'm trying to turn on 240,000 meters. Thank you.